All right, let's get right into it. When you hear the name Montessori, you probably think of a certain kind of school, right? But Maria Montessori wasn't just an educator, she was a physician, a scientist. And her method? Well, it wasn't just a new way to teach. It was a completely radical, scientific discovery about who children really are. And it all kicked off with this shocking moment of insight. She'd been working with children from insane asylums, kids society had completely written off. And they learned to read and write, and they passed the same public school exams as so-called normal children. But Montessori wasn't celebrating. She was deeply disturbed, asking herself, what is so fundamentally broken about our schools that they're crushing the potential of healthy kids?
To really get this, we have to go back to the beginning of her journey. See, before all the famous schools, Montessori was a doctor working with children that society had labeled hopelessly deficient and just cast aside.
Her scientific background changed everything. We're in the early 1900s, and she's using methods from physicians, focusing on sensory learning, not just memorizing facts. And the result? It was seen as a miracle. Her students passed the exams. But for her, this wasn't about her teaching. It was a massive red flag about the entire educational system. It forced her to ask, if these kids can do this, what on earth are we doing to our normal children?
And that one question led her to a really harsh, really powerful conclusion. It led her to analyze what she called the prison of school.
This lays out the core conflict she saw so clearly. On one side, you've got the traditional school. It demands that kids sit still, be quiet, and listen to a teacher lecture. Motivation comes from outside, stickers and punishments. But on the other side, you have the child's most basic biological need, to move, to be active, and to follow that powerful inner drive to learn. She saw these two things as being in a constant state of war.
And listen, she did not mince words. To Montessori, the school desk wasn't a helpful tool for learning, no way. It was a tool of oppression. This quote just shows how deeply she believed that forcing a child to be physically still was a kind of slavery that was literally crushing their spirit.
And it wasn't just about being stuck in a chair. She had this phrase for prizes and punishments. She called them the bench of the soul. She argued that real creativity, real progress, it never, ever comes from a cheap reward or the fear of getting in trouble. She believed those external motivators were basically a form of corruption. They teach a kid to work for a gold star, not for the pure joy and love of the work itself.
So, if the old system was a prison, what was the alternative? Her solution was totally radical. Give the child complete freedom. But, and this is key, it had to be within a very specific, scientifically designed environment.
And that brings us to her most brilliant concept, the prepared environment. Picture a classroom designed entirely for the child. The furniture is their size, the learning materials are beautiful, and they're right there on low shelves where kids can actually reach them. The whole space is calm, orderly, it's beautiful. The environment itself becomes the teacher, built to spark their natural curiosity.
So how does it actually work? Well, it's kind of like a three-step dance. First, liberty. The child is totally free to choose their own work. Second, observation. They handle these beautiful materials and they discover how they work just by using them. But here's the magic. The third step, auto-education. The materials are self-correcting. If you're building a tower and a piece doesn't fit, you see the error yourself. You fix it yourself. No adult has to come over and say, nope, that's wrong. The child literally teaches themselves.
Which of course brings up a big question. If the environment and the materials are doing so much of the teaching, what is the adult in the room supposed to be doing?
The teacher's most important job isn't to stand up front and lecture, not at all. It's to carefully, meticulously prepare and maintain this incredible learning environment, which Montessori really saw as a kind of scientific apparatus.
And then came the really hard part, the part that goes against every instinct, to step back, to learn, as she put it, how to do nothing, to fight that urge, to jump in, to correct, to direct, and to just let the child be.
In fact, she didn't even use the word teacher. She called the role a directress. Her job isn't to give out information, it's to observe, to guide, and to connect the child to the right material at the right time. The goal is to stimulate life and then get out of the way and let it develop freely. She teaches very little and she observes a whole lot.
So what happens when you combine this radical freedom, this special environment, and this new kind of teacher? Well, the results in her first children's houses were nothing short of an explosion of learning.
This single number just says it all. 4. In her very first school, located in the slums of Rome,
Kids started writing spontaneously at 4 years old. This wasn't after endless drills. It just happened. It was a natural explosion of language that came from deep within them.
But what about discipline? You'd think it would be chaos, right? Well, Montessori discovered something amazing. Real, genuine discipline didn't come from a teacher shouting commands. It just emerged spontaneously from the kids' deep concentration on work they had freely chosen. A disciplined child wasn't a silent, still child. A disciplined child was one who was happy and completely absorbed in their work.
But for Montessori, the academic stuff, the reading and the writing, that was almost just a side effect. The real goal, the true prize, was what she called the fruits of the spirit. In this environment of freedom and deep respect, she saw children developing patience, kindness, gentleness, and this incredible inner peace. They weren't just learning to read, they were building their own character.
In the end, Maria Montessori saw education not as filling up an empty bucket, but as lighting a fire. Her entire scientific method was designed to do one thing: remove all the obstacles that put out a child's natural fire for learning and just set their spirit free. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about today, doesn't it?